In the early 20th century, no ballerina was as famous as Anna Pavlova. When she died on tour in The Hague in 1931, it was headline news around the world. At the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées in Paris, where Bronislava Nijinska's ballet Etude was about to be performed, someone in the house read a telegram saying that Pavlova was dead, and the whole audience rose for a moment of silence. In London, where she lay in state in St. Philip's Russian Orthodox Church in Buckingham Palace Road, hundreds filed past the bier covered with flowers, while here in New York, her old partner, Michel Fokine, invited all the city's dancers to a requiem mass at the Russian Orthodox Church of Christ the Savior. Now no? Oh dear. Okay, there we are. A columnist for the Sunday Times shared memories of her unforgettable first appearance at the Palace Theater. Quote, her unique combination of passionate expressiveness, flame-like vitality, and unfailing beauty of movement. In the Times of India, another journalist recalled an interview with her in Bombay, as Mumbai used to be called, when she spoke of wanting to see the frescoes of Ajanta, Ellora, and Elephanta, and expressed her admiration for several Indian dancers. In Commedia, the Paris Theatre newspaper, Andrei Levinson, the leading dance critic of Russia abroad, lamented that he would no longer write of her as a living being, nor of the miracle of her art and the mystery of her persona. Oh dear. Okay. And the day after Pavlova's death, at a memorial concert danced by her company, the Chanson music for the dying swan was played on a stage empty except for a moving beam of light that dramatized the absence of her living body. Like her romantic era forebears, Anna Pavlova was an intrepid traveler, on the road for months at a time, and in her image, like that of Marie Taglioni's, circulated far and wide, even in places she had never been. In a century of migrations, she was both a sublime vagabond and a nomadic star, in Levinson's phrase, an exile in search of a lost homeland. She was also a populist, an artist of the people, the first of the great Slavic dance wave that flooded across world stages in the 1910s and 1920s, performing everywhere. She danced the dying swan across continents and decades, telling her maid just before she died, so we think, prepare my swan costume. By then, she had redefined what the ballerina looked like, changed the ballerina's default nationality to Russian, and imbued her with a modern sensibility. Born in St. Petersburg in 1881, Anna Pavlova came to the world. Now let's see if this will work. Okay. She came into the world at a time of voluptuous ballerinas. This one is Virginia Zucchi, divas who proclaimed their sexuality, as well as spectacular technicians like Pierina Legnani, the first to perform Odil's 32 fouette turns in Swan Lake, and Carlotta Brianza, whose precision as Aurora in The Sleeping Beauty, Tchaikovsky famously said, yielded nothing to the finest watch mechanism. Pavlova was a slight, sickly child, the daughter of a laundress and a reserve soldier she never mentioned. Her biological father was probably Jewish, a member of the Polyakov family of bankers and railroad builders. When she was 10, she entered the Imperial Ballet School with its iron discipline and 7-year training. She wasn't the only child of uncertain parentage at the school, but she seemed unusually determined to succeed, as ballerina Tamara Karsavina observed after her death. By the time she graduated in 1899, she had caught the eye of the ballettomanes, as well as the attention of the company's grandmaster, Marius Petipa. In the next few years, solo roles would come her way as Petipa, aware that his days at the Mariinsky were numbered, cast her in ballets aligned with the old romantic repertory, as Nikia in La Bayadere, and in the title role of Giselle, No. There. Pavlova not only capitalized on what one critic described as her astonishingly noble quality, rather in keeping with the old school, but also rejuvenated these roles for a new century, emphasizing their mystery, ethereality, and idealism. She was an early muse of Fokine, whose neo-romanticism she helped define, and an admirer of Isadora Duncan. Pavlova seems to have traveled for the first time outside the Russian Empire in 1907. The following year, with Adolf Bohm as her partner, she made her first foreign tour, which took her to Scandinavia, Germany, and Prague. In 1909, another went as far as Vienna, after which Pavlova joined Diaghilev's Ballet Russe in Paris. I'm just having a look, right? Yeah. At the end of that first triumphant Diaghilev season, she Pavlova cemented her partnership with Mikhail Mortkin, performing Fokine's Bacchanal at a gala for victims of a recent earthquake in Provence. Choreographed by Fokine, the dance, described by a French critic as sheer voluptuousness, became a calling card in her career in the career that now opened before her. Pavlova's first tours outside Russia took place under the sponsorship of the imperial theaters and were dominated by works from the Mariinsky's traditional repertory. Although Pavlova continued to return to the Mariinsky every season, she spent longer and longer periods outside Russia. No, come on, there. Seems to do what it wants. She danced in elite venues such as the Metropolitan Opera House and in popular ones such as London's Palace Theatre. She massaged the traditional repertory, reducing it in scale, and developed a repertory of solos and duos such as Bacchanal and The Dying Swan, which could stand alone on a program of divertissements. With the new works and new locales came new styles of stage attire. Okay. Pavlova used to say that she had learned the fluidity of her arms from in The Dying Swan from Isadora Duncan. But that was not the only thing she found to emulate in Duncan's performances. Although Pavlova continued to wear tutus when she deemed them appropriate, she also wore Grecian-style tunics, loose flowing gowns, long clinging dresses, and softly draped costumes, stage dress put into circulation by Duncan and her followers. These were costumes that dispensed with corsets and stays, and they appeared across Pavlova's repertory, in new works, of course, but even more tellingly in traditional ones such as Giselle and the Sleeping Beauty, of course, as Willies and as in the vision scene of Sleeping Beauty. In some ballets, sandals replaced point shoes, while in rehearsals, the chiton-style shift supplanted the practice tutu. In the United States especially, Pavlova spoke out against corsets and other restrictive undergarments. Quote, "If you sufficiently strengthen the muscles of the abdomen and the torso," she told a reporter, "you do not need stays." It sounds like she's been doing a little Pilates. Here was the liberated female body one finds in drawings of Isadora Duncan and in Leon Bach's designs for Diaghilev. Moreover, as with Duncan, there was a reciprocal relationship between dress on the Pavlova stage and the star's personal attire. And this is something that we've heard as a theme throughout the morning. As Patricia notes in her catalog essay, although Pavlova reportedly was a patron of a number of couture houses, only a few garments can be clearly identified as coming from Mariano Fortuny and Liberty of London. Fortuny, a Spanish, Fortuny, a Spanish-born textile, clothing, and lighting designer, was another connection between Pavlova and Isadora Duncan, who owned several of his finely pleated and immensely popular Delphos tea gowns. In one celebrated image, this one, Pavlova wears the figure-hugging gown with a huge fur hat, an inspired personal touch. She also borrowed the revived empire style for some of her offstage dresses, which you've seen before, including this elegant high-waisted gown adapted from a Paul Poiret design, and a related summer model. You've also seen this before. This is the lily patch in the garden at Ivy House. We'll talk about that in a moment. Sashes emphasize the high waist and girlish bosom in these fashions, while skirts skimmed lightly and modestly over the dancers' curves. For the dances of today, a series of social dance divertissements that premiered in New York in 1914, the gowns were designed by the House of Paquin in the most, quote, up-to-date style, further blurring the line between onstage and offstage dress. The Pavlova of the St. Petersburg years was a kept woman, but she was also discreet, which, well, we're waiting again for someone, yeah. Unlike Mathilde Koscinska, whom you've encountered before, Russia's most celebrated ballerina, who flaunted her wealth and Romanov connections. An admirer and a protector, Victor Dandre, had followed Pavlova's career from the start and almost certainly contributed to her upkeep. However, once Pavlova took to the road, he faded into the background, shaken off like the oppressive weight of the Mariinsky. In 1911, Dandre was imprisoned in St. Petersburg for embezzlement. Pavlova helped raise the money for bail, enabling him to slip in and out of Russia, to slip out of Russia and join her in the West. Pavlova, however, had no intention of returning to her old position as a kept woman. Instead, she used him as cover for the respectability that would secure her a social position commensurate with her artistic one. With Mortkin gone, she decided to expand the smallest ensemble of Russian and Polish dancers that had provided backup during certain engagements. She also decided that the new expanded ensemble, the foundation of her future company, would be chiefly English. No, go back, sorry. That's quite a contrast. The dancers Pavlova began working with in 1912 were very young, children really, and all girls. She would teach them and choreograph for them, try them out at events in London, and then take them with her on her ever longer tours. She would be their inspiration and their model, and her morals, like theirs, had to be spotless. Fashion would be an instrument in achieving this respectability. Pavlova came of theatrical age in St. Petersburg at the high tide of Edwardian fashion. Koscinska epitomized the ballerina courtesan, as we've said. Pavlova, however, moved in more artistic circles. Moreover, she didn't advertise her worth or circulate images of herself in recumbent or revealing poses. She kept abreast of fashion, and her new look is a lot like the styles worn by actresses and opera singers in Tony magazines such as Le Théâtre. In an era of lavishness, she opted for relative simplicity, as in this stunning hat on the left, which is strikingly similar. Let's see if this will come out. Come on. Yeah, which is strikingly similar to a model worn by the Folie Bergère vedette and courtesan Liane de Pougy. Pavlova trimmed and shaped, aiming for an understated theatricality rather than the glamorous display of the demi-mondaine. By 1912, when Pavlova acquired Ivy House, her home in North London, she had put lovers behind her. Come on. And tucked her emotions into tailored suits. Pavlova's modern taste was both an expression of respectability and a sign of expressive containment. Of course, with Dandre as her live-in manager, her personal life did not bear too close an examination. It is unclear if they were ever married, although by the time she died, he was universally referred to as her husband. The fact that he appeared considerably older than Pavlova gave an avuncular appearance to his relationship with her, cleansing it of sexuality. And she must have made it clear as soon as he arrived in England that she ran the growing company and made its decisions. Yeah. Ivy House was her domain, not his. She had bought it with her own earnings and transformed it, adding gardens, a pond with swans, and an aviary, and converting the huge central hall into a studio where she taught and rehearsed her dancers. It was a cross between an English country house in the north of London and an arts colony. Pavlova opened the gates with a housewarming for some 400 guests. There were flowers everywhere, music by the Palace Orchestra, and pop-up entertainments, including a dance by her students dressed as nymphs. At the climax, Pavlova and her new partner, Laura Novikov, performed an attic-style pas de deux. The society columns applauded, and Pavlova was showered with invitations, most of which she declined. An artist who danced for charity, she rarely hobnobbed with society. By 1914, as Pavlova stepped up the pace of her company's international touring, she spent all of World War I and then some in the United States and Latin America. Fashion was discarding the last traces of the Edwardian and the Belle Époque. Wartime clothing was simple and utilitarian, often remade from older items because of shortages of wool and linen. Suits, coats, and dresses grew simpler, straighter, and shorter. Just as dresses lost their lace, so hats lost their flowers, ribbons, and plumes. The new toques and cloches were practical and close-fitting. Pavlova took to the new fashions with her usual tact, personalizing them to accommodate her image and sense of style. As always, she dressed with taste, although she was never wed, as we've said, to particular designers and certainly wasn't fashion plate. Rather, she used clothing, at least at this point, to consolidate her image as an artist of the utmost professionalism, a new woman who defined herself by her work. Pavlova's stamina was prodigious. To Ruth Page's mother, she seemed to have endless endurance and vitality, and she never tires. Her work ethic impressed theater managers as well. Just think, one complained to the Metropolitan Musical Bureau, which was sponsoring the Ballet Russe tour headed by Nijinska. Just think of asking $5,000 for $5 per ticket for a show such as the one you're giving us certain nights, and think what Pavlova gave us for $250, and how that wonderful woman used to work 9 times a week and on the stage all the time. What drove her from country to country, city to city, across oceans and continents, almost nonstop from 1914 until she died in 1931? Her travels, which began as a lust for life and new experiences, over time became pilgrimages in search of redemption. Ultimately, the hunger to bring ballet to the masses ended in martyrdom. Like those martyred Renaissance saints depicted with their attributes, St. Agnes with her lamb, St. Catherine with her wheel, St. Lucy with her lamp, Pavlova lingers in collective memory as the dying swan, instantly recognizable with the swan costume as her attribute. Unlike most ballerinas of her generation, Pavlova was a populist. She danced everywhere and for everybody, earning the opprobrium of highbrows at times, but that didn't matter to her. In the upper reaches of New York's Hippodrome sat refugees from the shtetls of Russia whose lives were brightened by her presence, and to whom the miracle of her presence spoke directly. In Mexico City's huge bull ring, the crowds roared with pleasure when she danced a variation of their own Mexican hat dance. She summoned, and then they began tossing hats in. Dance with mine. She summoned this expressive gift day after day for over 20 years, whether she stood before a live audience or the camera. In 1953, the Marquis George de Cuevas, one of the more flamboyant personalities in the history of 20th century ballet, organized a costume ball for 2,000 guests at the Schibert Country Club near Biarritz, an event rumored to have cost nearly $200,000. That's in 1953 dollars. The high point of the event came when Rosella Hightower, costumed as Odette, appeared with a dozen enchanted swan maidens on a floating stage to the overture of Swan Lake. De Cuevas, who opened the ball as the king of nature, fussed for months over his costume, a gold-threaded tonnellet trimmed with lace and a wig of golden grapes topped by plumes designed by Pierre Balmain. Outside the heavily guarded gate, protesters carried signs reading, "Down with aristocrats," and "Remember the revolution." And a few days later, the Vatican newspaper, L'Osservatore Romano, denounced the ball as, quote, "a criminal folly," and, I like this one, "an insult to misery and sorrow." You know, this was still the aftermath of World War II. Compare this to Pavlova. Sorry. Go on, go back. Well, you had your glimpse of Pavlova on the merry-go-round at Kew. No, sorry, won't do it. So compare this to Pavlova. Oh, there she is, for whom fashion was a transparent extension of self, a discipline marking the boundaries of erotic expression and the antithesis of snobbery. Compare it as well to her populist crusade, her tireless efforts to bring the beauty and sensuous experience of ballet to people around the globe through the instrument of her own being, and because of who she was, a ballerina for all. Thank you.